Denise Whitfield was 34 years old when she skipped her hair appointment to surprise her husband at the airport, coffee in hand, ready to tell him the news that her freelance business had just landed a six-figure client. Terrence didn't know she was coming. He'd told her twice not to. Traffic, he said. She stood behind a pillar at baggage claim and watched him walk out laughing, his hand resting on the small of a woman's back. Bethany, 26. The car she climbed into was registered to Terrence's own consulting business, the same business Denise had quietly rescued 3 years earlier with her dead mother's life insurance money. Terrence didn't see her. He had no idea the woman he'd built his empire on top of was standing 20 feet away, memorizing every detail. Denise didn't cry. She didn't scream. She threw away the coffee, walked back to her car, and made a decision that would end everything Terrence thought he was getting away with. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The mock-up wasn't perfect yet. Denise could see it. A hair off-center, the spacing between the tagline and the logo just slightly too tight. Most people wouldn't catch it, but Denise wasn't most people. She leaned closer to her monitor, adjusted the kerning by 2 points, and sat back. There it was, clean, balanced, right. She saved the file and stretched her arms above her head, her shoulders popping from 3 hours of focused work. Outside the window of her home office, late afternoon sun cut across the backyard in long gold stripes. The Bradford pear tree Terrence had planted the year they moved in was dropping white petals onto the grass. She'd have to rake those up before they turned brown. She added it to the mental list she was already running. Rake petals, pick up Terrence's dry cleaning, call the plumber back about the guest bathroom, finalize the Mercer account invoice, buy milk. The Mercer account. She smiled at that one. 6 figures. Her biggest solo contract yet. A full brand identity package for a regional healthcare group expanding into 3 new markets. She'd been pitching them for 4 months. The email confirming the signed agreement had landed in her inbox that morning at 8:47 a.m. while she was still in her robe, and she had actually said yes out loud to an empty kitchen. She had been saving the news for tonight. She wanted to tell Terrence in person. Her phone buzzed on the desk beside her mouse. She glanced at it. Terrence. Hey babe, traffic around the airport is going to be a nightmare tonight. Just take the car service. I'll be fine. She read it twice, then set the phone back down. He'd already said the same thing 2 hours ago, almost word for word. She understood it as something husbands said. Don't go out of your way. She'd heard it before. Terrence was like that sometimes, preferred to manage his own logistics, didn't like being fussed over. She'd always chalked it up to his independent streak. She pulled up the joint checking account on her second monitor, the one she kept open most of the day out of habit. 8 years of managing his business books had made her this way. Numbers were a language she trusted more than most people trusted words. They didn't lie. They didn't soften things or rearrange themselves to be more comfortable. A number was a number. She scanned the recent transactions, groceries, the electric bill, a charge to a restaurant she recognized, then one she didn't. Solstice Spa and Wellness, Couples Retreat PKG, $387. She stared at it. Couples. The charge was dated 9 days ago, right in the middle of Terrence's Charleston trip. She told herself there was probably an explanation. Conference centers sometimes bundled spa access into their packages. Maybe the business had comped it. Maybe it was a mistake, a wrong card charged. She made a note to ask him about it tonight. She closed the tab. From her phone's voicemail, Terrence's voice filled the small office. Warm, familiar, a little rushed. She'd listened to it 3 times already, but she hit play again while she started gathering her things. Hey, it's me. Flight's on time, lands at 6:15. Don't worry about coming. Traffic's going to be ugly. I'll grab an Uber. See you tonight. Love you. She noticed he didn't say he'd missed her. She noticed, and then she told herself she was being ridiculous. It was a 15-second voicemail, not a poem. She was being paranoid. She knew what paranoia felt like. She'd grown up watching her mother read suspicion into everything after Denise's father left, and she had promised herself she would never live like that. Head down every time her husband traveled, hunting for proof of something that probably wasn't there. "Stop it," she told herself. "You are not your mother." She grabbed her keys off the hook by the door. The coffee was already waiting in the cup holder. A large, dark roast from the place on Moorhead Street, black with 1 sugar, exactly how Terence took it. She'd swung by on her lunch break and bought it as part of the whole plan, then realized she'd timed the pickup wrong by an hour and had to buy a fresh one. The first cup was still sitting on the kitchen counter, cold and forgotten. She had also printed the Mercer confirmation email, folded it neatly, tucked it in her coat pocket. She pictured the look on his face when she handed it to him, the way he would read it, look up at her, and grin the way he used to. That slow, wide grin, like he was genuinely proud of her. She wanted that moment. She backed out of the driveway and merged onto the interstate, the radio low, the city sliding past in the golden blur of late rush hour. The coffee smelled good. The evening felt full of something. 40 minutes later, she pulled into the short-term parking deck at Charlotte Douglas International. She found a spot on the second level, checked her lipstick in the visor mirror, and got out. Coffee in hand, coat buttoned, smiling. She walked toward the terminal, toward baggage claim, toward her husband. Baggage claim at Charlotte Douglas was loud and warm and smelled like recycled air and fast food. Denise stood near the far end of the arrivals hall, back straight, coffee in hand. The board above the carousels showed flight 1142 from Charleston. Landed. On time. She checked her watch. 6:22 p.m. She scanned the flow of passengers pushing through the glass doors. Business travelers with rolling bags. A family with a stroller. A young man carrying flowers, bouncing on his heels. She watched all of them and waited. The coffee was still warm. She heard him before she saw him. That laugh. Big, easy, unguarded. The laugh Terence saved for moments when he forgot to perform and just existed. She knew that laugh, the way you know a song you haven't heard in years. You recognize it in your chest before your brain catches up. She turned toward the sound. He came through the doors with his carry-on rolling behind him, jacket draped over one arm, and he was looking down at the woman walking beside him, grinning at something she'd just said. The woman was young, maybe mid-20s. She had natural hair pulled up loosely, dangling gold earrings, and the kind of relaxed, glowing posture that came from a week of being treated well. She was carrying a tote bag with a wellness company logo on the side. She was laughing too. Terence's hand was on her lower back, not brushing it, not passing by, resting there, the way you rest your hand on someone when you know exactly how they feel about it. Denise's feet stopped moving. She took one step sideways, slow and deliberate, until the wide concrete pillar beside the carousel was between her and them. She pressed her shoulder against it and stayed very still. She watched. They stopped near the baggage belt, and Terence said something close to the woman's ear. The woman, girl, something in Denise whispered, "She is a girl," tucked her chin down and smiled the private smile of someone who had just been told something meant only for them. Her hand came up and touched Terence's chest. Just once, just briefly, but she touched it the way you touch something that belongs to you. Denise's grip tightened on the coffee cup. She could feel the cardboard sleeve creasing under her fingers. She reached into her coat pocket with her other hand and pulled out her phone. Steady. Her hands were steady. She was grateful for that. She opened the camera, zoomed in just enough, and took 3 photos, the 2 of them standing close, his hand on her back, the woman's hand on his chest. Clear. Time-stamped. She put the phone away. 2 minutes later, Terence pulled his bag off the carousel, and the woman said something that made him laugh again. That same laugh, and he shook his head like she'd gotten him, like she always got him. They walked toward the exit together. At the curb, the woman set down her tote and turned to him, and Terence pulled her into a hug that lasted too long to be professional, and not long enough to be everything it clearly was. The woman said something into his shoulder. He pulled back and looked at her face, still smiling. Then she walked to a silver sedan parked at the curb. Denise's eyes went to the plate. She knew that plate. She had entered it into the business account records herself, 14 months ago, when Terrence had leased the car under his consulting LLC to write off the mileage. That was a company car. She watched it pull away. She stood there for a moment behind the pillar. The arrivals hall moved around her, wheels on tile, announcements overhead, a child crying somewhere near the doors. All of it felt very far away, like she was watching it through glass. Her mother's face came to her then. Not a chosen memory, just there. Her mother, sitting at the kitchen table at 2 a.m. with a stack of papers she didn't understand, crying in a way that had no sound. Denise had been 12. She had stood in the hallway in her socks and watched her mother try to read documents she had no idea existed until the day they arrived. Accounts she hadn't known about. Money already gone. A lawyer her father had hired 6 months before he told her anything was wrong. He had a head start, her mother had said once, years later, like it explained everything. And I was the last to know. Denise looked down at the coffee in her hand. She walked to the trash can near the exit and dropped it in. The cup hit the bottom with a hollow sound. She did not wait for Terrence to come back through the doors. She did not call his name. She did not give him the Mercer email folded in her pocket. She walked to the parking deck, found her car on the second level, got in, and pulled out into the slow crawl of airport traffic. She didn't cry. She didn't turn on the radio. She drove in silence, both hands on the wheel, and she started making a list in her head. Not of errands, not of things to ask him about. A different kind of list. Terrence came through the front door at 7:14 p.m. with his carry-on bumping over the threshold and his voice already filling the hallway. "Baby, I'm home!" Denise was standing at the kitchen counter, slicing a tomato. She looked up. She smiled. "Hey," she said. "How was the flight?" He dropped his bag by the stairs and came into the kitchen and kissed her on the cheek. He smelled like airport and cologne. Her cologne. The bottle she'd bought him for Christmas. She noted that. Filed it away. "Smooth," he said, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a bottle of water. "Honestly, that retreat did what it needed to do. Got me thinking about the Henderson pitch differently." He cracked the cap and drank. "Something smells good." "Pasta," she said. "Sit down. It's almost ready." He sat at the island and talked. That was the thing about Terrence. He could fill a room with sound when the mood was right, and his mood tonight was very right. He talked about the retreat facilitator, some leadership consultant who had made him reframe his whole approach to client retention. He talked about a guy he'd met from Raleigh doing similar work. He talked about the hotel gym being surprisingly good. Denise listened. She stirred the sauce. She asked small questions that kept him moving forward. She watched him the way she used to watch quarterly reports, looking for the number that didn't belong. His eyes were bright. He was relaxed in his shoulders. He ate well, cleaned his plate, and complimented the food twice. There was no guilt in him that she could see, no careful pauses, no over-explaining. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't performing relief. He was just comfortable. That was almost the worst part. How comfortable he was. She laughed at one of his jokes. It wasn't hard. The laugh came out the right shape, even if nothing behind it was real. She'd always been good at keeping her face honest, even when her mind was somewhere else entirely. Tonight, it was a skill she was quietly grateful for. After dinner, Terrence watched television in the living room while Denise cleaned up. She washed the dishes slowly, listening to the low sound of the TV, the occasional commentary he threw at the screen. Normal sounds. A normal night. She dried her hands on a dish towel and hung it straight on the rack. By 10 o'clock, Terrence was yawning. He stretched his arms above his head, announced that the travel had caught up with him, and headed upstairs. He kissed her on the top of her head on his way past. "Don't stay up too late," he said. "I won't," she said. She sat on the couch for another 20 minutes, listening to the sounds of him moving around upstairs. The shower running, the bathroom light going dark under the bedroom door, the soft creak of the mattress. She waited. When the house had been quiet long enough, she got up, took her phone off the charger, and walked to the back of the house, to her office, where she closed the door without making a sound. She stood in the dark for a moment, one hand still on the doorknob. Then she turned on the desk lamp and called Vivian. Vivian picked up on the second ring. "It's almost 11, Vivian said, not annoyed, just clocking it. "I know," Denise said. "I need to ask you something." A brief pause. Vivian heard something in those 7 words that most people would have missed. Denise knew she would. That was why she'd called her. "Okay," Vivian said, her voice shifting into something quieter and more level. "What do you need?" "I need you to look at the business accounts," Denise said. "Terrence's Consulting LLC. Quietly. I need to know if there's anything in there that doesn't make sense. Payments that shouldn't be there, anything moved that I wouldn't have approved." Vivian didn't ask why. She didn't ask if Denise was okay, or what had happened, or whether she was sure. Those were not the questions Vivian asked. "How far back?" she said. "Start with the last 12 months, Denise said. "I can get you read access to the records by tomorrow morning. I still have login credentials. I'm the one who set up the system." "I know you are," Vivian said. "Send them when you're ready. I'll be careful." "I know you will," Denise said. "Thank you." She ended the call, set the phone face down on the desk, put both hands flat on the surface, and stood there, looking at the wall of shelving across the room. The folders lined up straight, the client binders, the small framed print her mother had given her that read, "Measure twice." She had not cried yet. She found she still didn't want to. The feeling inside her wasn't grief, exactly. It was more like the moment before you pick up something heavy, when your whole body goes quiet and prepares. She turned off the lamp and walked back upstairs. She lay down beside Terrence in the dark. He was breathing slow and even, already deep in sleep, one arm thrown over his side of the bed. She looked up at the ceiling. She was not going to beg. She was not going to confront him over a feeling and give him the chance to talk her out of what she knew. She was going to find out exactly how deep this went first, every single layer of it. Then she would decide what to do. Vivian's text came on a Tuesday afternoon, short and direct. "Found something. Come in person. Don't bring him." That last part wasn't necessary, but Denise appreciated that Vivian said it anyway. She told Terrence she was meeting a client for a portfolio review. He was already half focused on his laptop and nodded without looking up. She picked up her keys, drove the 12 minutes to Vivian's house in Noda, and parked on the street. Vivian answered the door before she knocked. "Come in," she said. "Coffee's on." Vivian's home office was the kind of space that made sense the moment you walked into it. Everything had a place. 2 monitors, a laser printer humming on a side table, file folders labeled in neat handwriting, a small whiteboard on the wall with column headers written in dry erase marker. It was the office of someone who thought in systems, and right now those systems had been pointed directly at Terrence's business. Vivian poured 2 mugs and set them on the desk without asking how Denise took hers. She already knew. "Sit down," she said. Denise sat. Vivian didn't ease into it. She picked up a stack of printed pages from the corner of the desk, set them flat in front of Denise, and put her finger on the top sheet. "Bethany Cole," she said, "listed in the LLC's vendor records as an independent contractor. Category: Wellness Consulting." Denise looked at the page. It was an invoice. Clean formatting, professional header, a license number printed at the bottom. She's been pulling payments from the business account for 8 months, Vivian said. 39 payments, ranging from $800 to $2,000 each. Total paid out? She turned to the second page and tapped a highlighted figure. $42,600. The number sat on the page like something heavy. Is there documentation? Denise asked. Her voice was flat, steady. Contracts, deliverables, meeting records? Nothing, Vivian said. Not a single attached deliverable. No scope of work. No service agreement on file. The invoices just say, monthly wellness consulting retainer, and a date. That's it. Denise picked up the invoice and looked at the license number printed along the bottom edge. It was a real number. She could tell by the format, the prefix, the digits, the way it was structured. That's her actual coaching license, Denise said. Yes, Vivian said. I verified it against the state registry this morning. That's her real credential. She didn't use a fake identity or a shell. She signed her own name and her own license number to every single one of these. Denise set the invoice back down. She straightened it so the edge was flush with the edge of the desk. Which account was this coming out of? She asked. Vivian pulled a third page from the stack and slid it across. Denise looked at it. She recognized the account number immediately. It was the business operating account, the one she had spent the better part of a year stabilizing after Terrence's largest client had pulled out without warning. The one she had quietly, carefully, replenished using the payout from her mother's life insurance policy. $50,000 she had carried in a cashier's check to the bank on a gray February morning, 3 years ago, 8 months after the funeral. She had never told Terrence how close the business had actually come to folding. She'd just fixed it, the way she fixed everything. That money was in this account, and $42,000 of it had been moved out, month by month, in neat increments, to a woman who had been sleeping with her husband. Denise put the page down. She did not grip the edge of the desk. She did not press her eyes shut. She sat straight in the chair and breathed once, slow and even, the way she used to breathe before a big client presentation when the nerves wanted to shake her apart. She knew, Denise said. It wasn't a question. She signed the invoices, Vivian said quietly. She knew exactly what she was signing. The room held that for a moment. Vivian didn't fill the silence. She never did. It was one of the things Denise had always valued about her. She understood that some information needed a second to settle before the next word got said. Denise looked at the stack of papers in front of her. 8 months. $42,000. $42,000 that had started as her mother's life savings, a policy her mother had kept up for 30 years on a teacher's salary because she believed that what you leave behind for your children is the truest thing about you. It had been moved out in quiet little pieces to fund whatever this was. Denise picked up the stack of pages and evened the edges against the desk until they were perfectly aligned. She set them back down. "Can you print me a full copy of everything?" she said. "Every invoice, every transaction, the account summary." "Already done," Vivian said. She picked up a sealed manila folder from the corner of the desk and held it out. "Organized by date, oldest to most recent." Denise took it. "Thank you," she said, "for being careful, for doing it right." "That's the only way I know how to do it," Vivian said. Denise picked up her coffee, drank the last of it, and stood. She drove home with the folder on the passenger seat, not in her bag, on the seat, where she could see it. Inside the house, she went straight to her office. She opened the bottom drawer of her desk, the one with the small lock she'd installed 2 years ago when she started keeping client contracts at home. She placed the folder inside. She locked the drawer. She put the key in the small ceramic dish on her bookshelf, behind the row of design books, where it had always lived. She stood at her desk and opened her laptop. She pulled up a blank document and sat looking at the cursor for a moment. Then she began to type. Not a letter, not a confrontation, not anything emotional at all. A list. Clean columns. Dates, amounts, names, account numbers. Every piece of information Vivian had given her, recorded in her own hand, in her own system. the way she would organize the foundation of any serious project she intended to finish. Denise made his favorite dinner on Wednesday: smothered pork chops, rice, and the cornbread he liked from scratch, not the boxed kind. She set the table properly: cloth napkins, the good glasses. She asked about his week while she stirred the gravy, and she listened to his answers with her eyes on his face and her expression warm and open. Terrence talked easily. He always did when he felt comfortable. He told her about a potential new client in Raleigh, complained about a vendor who kept missing deadlines, mentioned he might need to travel again in a few weeks. "Where this time?" Denise asked. She kept her voice light. "Probably Charleston again," he said. "There's a project down there I'm trying to close out." She nodded and set his plate in front of him. "I'll make sure your dry cleaning is ready," she said. He smiled at her, the easy, uncomplicated smile of a man who believed himself perfectly safe. She smiled back. The phone was on the kitchen counter on Thursday evening. Terrence was in the shower. His cell sat face up beside the fruit bowl, screen still lit from whatever he'd just been reading. She was filling a glass of water at the sink when she saw it. She didn't move fast. She didn't look toward the hallway. She just picked it up, the way anyone might pick up a phone that wasn't theirs, to check the time. The message thread was already open. The name at the top read B. The most recent message from B read, "Can't wait for Charleston. Book us the same place as last time." Below it, Terrence had replied, "Already on it, 2 weeks." Denise looked at the thread for 3 seconds. Then she set the phone back down exactly as she'd found it, screen up, same angle, same position, beside the fruit bowl. She pulled her own phone from her pocket. She photographed the screen before it could go dark. Then she turned back to the sink and finished filling her glass. When Terrence came downstairs in his undershirt and sweatpants, she handed him a glass of water too, because she'd poured one for him without thinking about it, which was the kind of thing she'd been doing for 8 years without being asked. "Thanks," he said, and sat down on the couch. "Of course," she said. Odessa arrived Sunday at noon. She was a small woman, sharp-eyed and unhurried, with close-cropped silver hair and the careful posture of someone who had learned a long time ago not to show everything she was thinking. She brought sweet potato pie and a begonia cutting in a plastic cup of water, because she always brought something growing. Denise welcomed her in, took her coat, and put her to work slicing tomatoes at the cutting board while she finished the rest of the meal. That was how they operated. Odessa didn't like sitting still while someone else cooked, and Denise had always respected that about her. Terrence stayed through dinner, easy and charming the way he was around his mother, and then excused himself to take a work call and disappeared upstairs. Odessa watched him go. Then she set down her fork, folded her hands on the edge of the table, and looked at Denise. "You're being too careful," she said. Denise looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're hosting," Odessa said. "You've been hosting since I walked in. That's not the same as being okay." She paused. "I know the difference." The kitchen was quiet. The sound of Terrence's voice, muffled, drifted down from upstairs. Denise held Odessa's gaze and said nothing. Odessa nodded slowly. "His father did the same thing," she said. "Kept everything smooth on the surface. By the time I found out, there was nothing left to find." She looked down at her hands. "I should have looked sooner. I knew I should have looked, and I didn't." "Odessa, there's a property," Odessa said. Her voice was quiet and level. "Over in Concord. His father bought it years ago, left it in his name when he passed, never formally transferred it. Terrence has been fixing it up. New roof went on last spring. I saw it when I drove out there in March." She paused. "He never mentioned it to you, did he?" Denise didn't answer. She didn't need to. "I didn't think so," Odessa said. She reached into her purse and took out a folded piece of paper, an address written in her neat, deliberate handwriting, and set it on the table between them. "I want no part of protecting him," Odessa said simply. "Not from this." After Odessa left, Denise washed the dishes by hand. She dried every one. She put them away in the right cabinets in the right order. Then she went to her office, unlocked the bottom drawer, and opened her folder. She unfolded Odessa's paper and smoothed it flat against the desk. She wrote the address into her document in clean, even letters, added the date beside it, and noted the source. Then she locked the drawer again, put the key back behind the books, and turned off the light. Gregory Alston's office was on the 4th floor of a quiet building on South Tryon Street, the kind of place that didn't need to advertise. Dark wood trim, framed diplomas on the wall, a window that looked out over the street below, where people moved in and out of the lunch crowd like they had nowhere in particular to be. Denise had been here once before, 6 years ago, when her father's estate needed closing. Gregory had handled it cleanly, carefully, and without charging the family more than was fair. She had never forgotten that. His assistant showed her in at 11 on the dot. Gregory stood when she entered. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a close-trimmed beard going gray at the edges, and the steady, unhurried manner of a man who had heard every kind of hard story and still treated each one like it mattered. He shook her hand firmly. "Denise." His voice was warm without being soft. "Sit down. Tell me what you have." She sat. She opened her bag. She placed Vivian's printed records on the desk first. The full 8 months of fraudulent contractor payments, each invoice numbered and dated, Bethany's real licensing number printed clean at the bottom of every page. Then she set down the photographs. Terrence at baggage claim, hand on Bethany's lower back. The phone screen showing the text thread, the name B, and the message about Charleston, time-stamped. Last, she unfolded Odessa's note and smoothed it flat on the desk. "Property in Concord," she said. "Held under his father's name. Terrence has been funding renovations. New roof went on last spring. It was never disclosed to me." Gregory didn't rush. He picked up each document in turn, reading carefully, setting each one down in a neat line across his desk. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "How long have you been building this?" he asked. "About 2 weeks," Denise said. He looked at her steadily. "All right," he said. "Let me tell you exactly where you stand." He walked her through it without padding it. North Carolina recognized dissipation of marital assets, meaning if a spouse spent shared money on an affair or hid assets to keep them out of a future divorce settlement, the court could claw that money back. The $40,000 in fraudulent contractor payments qualified. So did any funds Terrence had quietly poured into the Concord property, if she could tie the source to marital accounts. "The invoices give you timeline and intent," Gregory said, setting one finger on Vivian's records. 8 months. Bethany's real license number on every one. That's not sloppy. That's deliberate. Somebody made a choice to run this through the business, knowing it looked legitimate on paper. He paused. Which also means she's not just a third party in this situation. She's a participant in the financial deception. Denise nodded once. She already knew that. She had known it since the morning Vivian laid the papers out in front of her, but hearing it stated plainly, in a quiet office, by a man who had been practicing family law for 15 years, made it real in a different way. "What does that mean for her?" Denise asked. Gregory picked up one of the invoices and turned it slightly toward her. "Licensed wellness coaches are governed by a professional ethics board. Their rules are clear. You cannot bill for services that were never rendered. It doesn't matter what the arrangement was personally. The moment she attached her license number to a false invoice and accepted payment, she created a paper trail that belongs to her alone." He set the page down. "A formal complaint filed with the licensing board would trigger an independent investigation, separate from the divorce, separate from Terrence, just her credentials and what she signed her name to." Denise was quiet for a moment. "How formal does that process need to be?" she asked. "Written complaint, submitted through the board's official channel, with supporting documentation attached," he said. "You don't need an attorney for that part. You just need exactly what you already have. She sat with that for a second. And the property? That's where I come in, Gregory said. He pulled a legal pad toward him and uncapped his pen. I can begin preparing the paperwork needed to freeze any account we can connect to undisclosed assets. When you're ready to file for divorce, that freeze goes in simultaneously, before he has time to move anything. He looked at her. The key word is when you're ready. I don't file a single page until you tell me to. You control the timing. Good, Denise said. He wrote something on the pad, then looked up. Is there anything else you haven't shown me yet? Not yet, she said. But I think there might be more. He nodded like that didn't surprise him. Then keep building. Don't confront him. Don't signal anything. Every week he feels safe is a week he stays careless. I know, she said. Gregory compiled copies of her documents into a fresh folder, added 3 pages of typed legal notes, and slid it across the desk to her. Take this home, he said. Lock it up. Call me when you're ready. She rode the elevator down alone. Outside, the lunch crowd had thinned. The street was quieter now. She walked to her car, sat down, and set the folder on the passenger seat. She put both hands on the wheel. For the first time since she had stood behind that pillar in baggage claim and watched her husband's hand rest on another woman's back, Denise Whitfield felt something she had not expected to feel. In control. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Denise was at her desk, finishing color corrections on a branding package for a new client, when her phone buzzed. Vivian's name on the screen. She picked up on the second ring. I need you to come over, Vivian said. No greeting, no warm-up. Today, if you can. Denise set down her stylus. How bad? Bad enough that I didn't want to say it over the phone. A pause. He opened a new account, Denise. Inside the business system. I almost missed it. It was buried under a vendor category he hadn't used in months. Denise was already standing. I'll be there in an hour. Vivian's home office smelled like coffee and printer ink. She had the records pulled up on 2 monitors when Denise arrived, and she didn't waste time. Here, she said, pointing to the left screen. It was a transaction summary, a new account, created 6 weeks ago, labeled simply, Future Planning. Consulting reserve. He set it up inside the existing business structure, Vivian said, small enough that it wouldn't flag a basic review. He's been moving money into it in pieces, never more than $3,000 at a time, always after a larger invoice clears. She clicked to the next screen. In 6 weeks, he's moved just under $18,000 into it. Denise stared at the numbers. He's building a cushion, she said. He's building a runway, Vivian said. There's a difference. A cushion is for emergencies. This, she tapped the screen, this has a structure. He's not saving, Denise. He's preparing. Denise said nothing. She just looked at the account label again. Future planning. She thought about the Concord property, the $40,000 paid to Bethany, 8 months of carefully worded invoices. And now this. Neat, quiet, methodical. He had been planning this for a long time. She drove home in silence. The house was empty. Terrence had a client call that afternoon and wouldn't be back until after 6. She set her bag on the kitchen counter, poured a glass of water she didn't drink, and stood in the quiet. That's when she heard it. The home phone, the landline they kept mostly for business overflow, sat on the kitchen desk, its message light blinking red. She had walked past it 100 times that week without checking it. She pressed play. Terrence's voice filled the kitchen. Yeah, I know. I just need a few more weeks to get everything settled on my end before I make any changes. The account's building up the way I planned. Once the dinner's done and the investors are locked in, I can start moving things around without it looking off. And listen. A pause. A soft exhale. Tell the doctor we'll confirm the appointment once things are handled. I want to take care of you. Both of you. I just need the timing to be right. The message ended. The kitchen was very quiet. Denise stood completely still, one hand resting flat on the counter. She did not move for a long moment. She just let the words sit in the air around her. Both of you. Until they settled into something she could hold without falling apart. Bethany was pregnant. He was leaving. He had always been leaving. The airport hadn't been a reckless mistake. It hadn't been passion overriding his judgment for one careless afternoon. It had been a step in a sequence he had already mapped out. The account, the property, the dinner, the exit. She had simply been the last to know the plan. Her mother's face moved through her mind, standing in a kitchen not so different from this one, holding papers she hadn't known to look for until it was too late. Denise pressed her lips together. She was not her mother. She picked up her phone and called Gregory first. The three-way call took 40 minutes. Gregory walked through it in clean, ordered steps. The new account gave them a second, current example of fund diversion, more recent than the contractor payments, happening right now, which strengthened the dissipation argument considerably. Combined with the Concord property and Vivian's full audit, the case was no longer a picture with missing pieces. It was complete. "The investor dinner," Gregory said. "When is it?" 11 days, Denise said. "Thursday the 17th. He's been building toward it for 6 weeks. "Then we file on the 16th, Gregory said. "Account freeze goes in the evening before. By the time he walks into that dinner, the account is already locked." Vivian spoke next. "I can have the full financial summary ready by the 12th. Clean, documented, every transfer traced and sourced." "Good," Gregory said. "Denise, the licensing complaint. That's yours to file. It doesn't require my involvement, but the timing matters. File it the same week. Let both things land at once." "I'll draft it this weekend," Denise said. Her voice was steady. It had been steady the whole call. When they hung up, the house was quiet again. Denise sat at her desk. She opened the bottom drawer and took out the folder, the one she had built piece by piece over the past 3 weeks. The photographs, the invoices, Vivian's audit, Gregory's legal notes, the property address in Odessa's handwriting. She set each document out in a neat row. Everything she needed was right there in front of her. The alarm didn't wake her. Denise was already sitting up when it went off at 6, her eyes open and clear, like her body had decided sleep was finished long before the clock caught up. The bedroom was gray and quiet. Terrence was still out, one arm folded across his chest, breathing slow and even. She watched him for exactly 3 seconds. Then she got up, pulled on her robe, and went to her office. Gregory picked up on the first ring. "It's done," he said before she could ask. "Filed last night at 7:42. The freeze order processes this afternoon. They have until 4 o'clock to complete it. After that, no transfers in or out of that account without a court order." Denise exhaled slowly through her nose. "And there's no way he sees it coming before the dinner?" "Not unless someone at the firm tips him off, and that won't happen." Gregory's voice was steady, practiced. He had done this before, guided people through the hardest days of their lives without letting them fall sideways. "By the time he sits down with those investors tonight, the account is already locked. Whatever he planned to do with that money after the dinner, he can't do it." "Good," Denise said. "How are you?" It was a simple question. She appreciated that he kept it simple. "I'm focused," she said. "Good," he said back. "Stay that way. Call me when it's over." She made coffee. Real coffee, not from a pod, the kind that took a few minutes and filled the kitchen with something that smelled like a normal morning. While it brewed, she sat at her desk and opened her laptop. The complaint form for the State Wellness and Life Coaching Licensing Board had been sitting in her drafts folder since Saturday. She had written it and rewritten it 3 times, cutting down the language each time until what remained was clean and factual and completely without emotion. No accusations beyond what the documents proved, no language that could be read as personal. Just the invoice numbers, the dates, the license credential attached to each one, and a single clear statement. The billing records do not correspond to any documented services rendered. She read it through one more time. Then she attached Vivian's invoice summary, each fraudulent payment listed in order, Bethany's real license number printed clearly at the top of every page, and hit submit. A confirmation number appeared on her screen. She wrote it down in the folder. Then she closed the laptop. Vivian's email arrived at 8:17. The subject line was just, "Ready." Denise opened it and found a single PDF, 15 pages, clean enough to hand to someone who had never seen it before and still understand exactly what had happened. Every diverted transfer, every fraudulent invoice, the hidden account, the Concord property, the timeline laid out in plain columns with dates and dollar amounts that didn't lie. Vivian had added a cover page at the front, 3 sentences summarizing what the document contained. No editorializing, no drama, just facts arranged in an order that told a story all on their own. Denise printed 2 copies. She put one in the folder. The other she folded once and slid into the small inside pocket of the handbag she planned to carry that evening, just in case. She showered and took her time getting dressed. She chose the deep navy wrap dress, the one she had bought last spring and never worn because there had never been the right occasion. It fit well. It was composed without being stiff. She did her hair the way she used to when she cared about how she looked walking into a room, not because she was trying to impress anyone, but because she had earned the right to walk in feeling like herself. She stood in front of the mirror for a moment. 34 years old, sharp, still here. She thought briefly about what Terrence had said to someone on the phone 3 weeks ago. She doesn't need to be managed, and she let the small sting of it rise and pass without chasing it. She picked up her earrings and put them on. Her talking points were already memorized, but she reviewed them anyway, standing in the kitchen while Terrence showered down the hall. Not accusations, observations. Not confrontation, information. Facts about the business that any investor had a right to know before committing further funds. Bethany's name would not come up. It didn't need to. The numbers said everything that needed saying. She was calm. She was not performing calm. She actually was. Terrence came downstairs at 6:45 in a charcoal suit and a good mood, the kind of loose, easy confidence that came from a man who believed everything was going exactly according to plan. "You look nice," he said, glancing at her dress. "Thank you," she said. She picked up her handbag from the counter. Inside it, her phone, her lip gloss, and one folded copy of everything Vivian had built. Terrence held the front door open. "Ready?" he said. Denise stepped through it. "Yes," she said. She got into the passenger seat. Terrence started the car, turned on the radio, and pulled out of the driveway. Easy, unhurried, completely unaware. Denise folded her hands in her lap and watched the road ahead. The restaurant was called Perrin. It sat on the top floor of a building in uptown Charlotte, the kind of place where the lighting was always low and golden, where the chairs were leather and the tablecloths were pressed flat without a single crease, the kind of place where men like Terrence Whitfield took people they needed to impress. The private dining room was already set when they arrived, a long mahogany table, 8 chairs, fresh flowers at the center that nobody had ordered for themselves. 3 of Terrence's investors were already standing near the bar at the back of the room, drinks in hand. Paul Ederle, Marcus Webb, and a quieter man named Sutton, who had put in the largest stake 2 years prior and said almost nothing at these dinners, which somehow made him the most important person in the room. Odessa was there too, seated near the end of the table, wearing a deep burgundy blouse and her late husband's watch on her left wrist. She and Denise exchanged a look when Denise entered. No words, just a single, steady nod. Terrence moved through the room easily, shaking hands, clapping Marcus on the shoulder, laughing at something Paul said before the punchline landed. This was the version of Terrence that had made people believe in him. The charm was real. That was the part Denise had never been able to dismiss. The charm was always real. It just didn't mean what she had once thought it meant. She took her seat near the center of the table, folded her hands in her lap, and let the evening begin. Dinner moved the way these dinners always did. Appetizers, surface conversation, a round of Terrence summarizing the business's current positioning with the easy confidence of a man reading from a script he had memorized years ago and never updated. Denise ate slowly. She listened. She smiled when the moment called for it and said nothing that mattered. She was simply a wife at her husband's dinner. The entrees arrived. Terence shifted into the part of the evening she had been waiting for, the forward-looking portion, the one where he laid out growth projections and made the numbers sound like a promise. "This next quarter is where we see the real return on what you've all committed," Terence said, setting down his fork with the practiced ease of a man who believed his own story. "The infrastructure is there. The accounts are positioned. We're ready to scale." "That's actually something I'd like to address," Denise said. Her voice was level, quiet enough that no one could have mistaken it for outburst, but clear enough that everyone at the table heard it. Terence turned to look at her. She was already reaching into her handbag. "Before anyone commits further funds," she said, placing the folded document on the table and opening it flat, "I think it's only fair that the people in this room are aware of some financial discrepancies I came across while reviewing the business accounts." She slid a copy toward Paul first, then pushed one toward Sutton. "There are unexplained transfers totaling well into 6 figures over the past 8 months. The documentation here outlines the timeline and the amounts." The table went quiet. Not awkward quiet, a different kind. The kind where people are reading instead of speaking. Terence's face went through 3 things in quick succession: confusion, recognition, a pale, bloodless stillness that settled into his jaw and didn't leave. "Denise, the numbers are all sourced directly from the business records," she said simply, without looking at him. "I'm not editorializing. Take a look at what's in front of you." Sutton had not touched his food since she began speaking. He was reading. His eyes moved down the page in slow, deliberate lines. Marcus looked at Terence, then looked back at the document. Odessa set down her water glass with a small, careful click. She cleared her throat once. "There's also a property," she said, to no one in particular, her voice unhurried and matter-of-fact. "In Concord. It's under my late husband's name, but Terence has been putting money into it. I've known about it for some time." She folded her hands on the table. "I thought someone else should know, too." The silence that followed was absolute. Sutton placed the document flat on the table and sat back in his chair without saying a word. Paul looked down at his plate. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck slowly. Terence pushed back from his chair and spoke low and close to Denise's ear. "I need to talk to you. Right now. Outside." She turned and looked at him, fully and without flinching. "The numbers speak for themselves, Terence." He straightened up. His jaw worked silently for a moment, searching for something to say to the room. Nothing came. Sutton was the first to stand. He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair, folded it over one arm, and extended a hand across the table to Denise. "Thank you for dinner," he said. Then he left. Paul followed without ceremony. Marcus stayed an extra 30 seconds, as if waiting for something to change, and then he too stood up and excused himself quietly. One by one, the chairs emptied. Terence stood at the head of the table, alone, surrounded by half-finished plates and the soft, indifferent glow of the restaurant's golden light. He did not sit back down. The account freeze processed on a Thursday. Gregory called Denise at 9:14 in the morning, and his voice was calm and even the way it always was, but she could hear something underneath it. Satisfaction, quiet and controlled. "It went through," he said. "The contested funds are frozen pending the divorce proceedings. Based on the documented timeline Vivian compiled, we have a strong case for full dissipation recovery." Denise was standing at her kitchen window, watching a cardinal sit on the backyard fence. It didn't move, just sat there, bright red against the gray November sky. "How much?" she asked. Gregory told her the number. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she said, "Thank you, Gregory," and she meant it down to her bones. Terence's investors didn't wait for a second meeting. Sutton's office sent a formal withdrawal letter by the end of that same week. 2 pages, clean language, no names called, no accusations made outright. Just a polished, professional exit that said everything by saying almost nothing. Paul followed 2 days later with a phone call that lasted under 3 minutes. Marcus sent an email. The business partners took a little longer. 8 days. but they got there. Denise heard about it secondhand through Gregory, who heard it through the way these things always travel in professional circles, quietly, quickly, and without anyone wanting their name attached to the telling. The official reason cited in the dissolution paperwork was irreconcilable differences in financial transparency, which was, Denise thought, an extremely polite way to say what everyone in that private dining room already knew. Bethany's letter arrived from the licensing board 6 weeks after Denise filed the complaint. She didn't see it directly. Gregory's paralegal forwarded her the board's case status update, formal language, procedural, and dry, but the meaning was plain enough. The board had opened a disciplinary investigation into the fraudulent invoices. Bethany's license to practice as a wellness coach was suspended pending the outcome of the review. All active clients had been formally notified. The coaching practice she had built, the website with the soft pastel colors and the professional headshot, and the carefully worded testimonials, went dark within the week. Denise didn't feel triumphant reading that update. She felt something quieter than that, something closer to a door closing firmly on its own, without anyone having to force it. Without the diverted business funds, and without her coaching income, whatever Terrence had promised Bethany became something he could no longer deliver. The fantasy required financing. When the financing disappeared, the fantasy did too. Bethany was gone within the month. Not dramatically, not with a scene that anyone witnessed. She simply left, relocated out of state, signing on with a different wellness firm in a city where her name didn't carry a paper trail yet. Starting over. Rebuilding something smaller than what she thought she'd been getting. Terrence didn't follow her. The divorce was finalized on a gray February morning. Denise sat across a conference table from Terrence for the last time in Gregory's office, and she watched her husband, her ex-husband, sign his name on the final set of documents with a pen that shook almost imperceptibly at the first stroke. He didn't look at her when he slid the papers across the table. She looked at him, though. Briefly, long enough to see that the charm was still there, still sitting in the lines of his face the way it always had, just with nothing behind it now, like a storefront with the lights left on after the business has closed. She signed her name clearly and set down the pen. She left with her design business fully intact, a fair financial settlement, and the quiet, solid knowledge that she had not let grief make her careless. 18 months later, the studio occupied a bright corner unit on the second floor of a building in Noda, the kind of space with tall windows and exposed brick, and just enough hum from the street below to keep the silence from getting heavy. Denise had 3 designers working for her now. Real ones, people with talent, people who showed up early and asked smart questions and pushed back on her ideas when they had better ones. She liked that most of all, the pushing back. She was mentoring a young woman named Asha who reminded her, sometimes, of herself at 24. Sharp eye, stubborn streak, the tendency to solve 12 problems before breakfast and not tell anyone about any of them. On the morning of her 36th birthday, Denise stood in her bathroom in the quiet of early light. The mirror was the same one she had looked into on 100 ordinary mornings, standing in the same house she'd kept after the settlement, the same woman who had driven to an airport with a cup of coffee and nearly missed the truth until it walked right past her. She looked at herself now, at the face she had been told, in one way and another, was being replaced, the face that had kept its composure through a dinner, through a courtroom, through every single night it had held its silence instead of screaming. She looked, and for the first time in years, not forced, not performed, not for anyone in the room but herself, she smiled. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!